Imagined that I would be sitting here typing this. But here I am, 6 months before I moved to a charming suburban subdivision called Maplewood Glade, where immaculately trimmed bushes and strict homeowners association rules ringed everyday life as a remote working legal consultant. I was drawn by the allure of tranquility, but unknown to me was the fact that my legal background would quickly turn into my sword and shield against a neighborhood bully named Margaret Penrose, the infamous HOA president. My introduction to Maplewood Glade was charm. I received the standard welcome packet neatly arranged in a binder, outlining all the rules and expectations the residents were greeting. I'd catch couples walking dogs, golden hour evenings, neighbors greeting and waving, and the occasional barbecue or block party flyers that started appearing under my door. It was pleasant, that is, until I got a sample of Margaret's dictatorship up close a week. A notice in gaudy red ink was pinned on my front door infraction. Illegal garden decoration, take away within 24 hours, or be fined $100. It was about a bird bath that I'd placed in my garden. Nothing squalid, just a mere stone bowl ringed by peonies. The notice was signed with Margaret's name and phone number, trying to be polite. I phoned her, I gave my name, and explained I hadn't seen anything in the bylaws explicitly prohibiting bird baths. Margaret's attitude was abrupt and haughty. Section 6, paragraph 3. No unauthorized decorative aspects visible from Street Am, doing as told, and we all had them in agreement. I suggest you review the regulations before you install anything more. Her haughtiness grated, but I gratefully thanked her and did precisely as she advised. I consulted the bylaws because I didn't want to assume the rule had prior approval necessary for things decorative and not some generic prohibition. I filled out the proper form and received formal sanction by the other board member a week after Margaret viewed the bird bath. Was there, but simply obviously wasn't thrilled. But holding the permit, she wasn't allowed to comment. This could have ended it, but instead was but the beginning of what became an organized crusade. Over the next several months or so, I began to receive a series of warnings. Lawn half an inch too long, dustbins allegedly featuring. This wasn't the case. Even hues of the curtains jarring with community style. Every time I wrote down everything, checked the bylaws, and replied firmly but respectfully to the community meetings, Margaret began giving me those cold stares. When I asked questions about selective enforcement of policies, her lips would purse. The tension brewed, things heated up when I rented out my guest room to a graduate student, Daniel, from the local university, Maplewood Glades. Bylaws permitted homeowners to rent out rooms as long as the owner stayed in residence, and proper documents were filed. I filed everything, including the lease, and received receipt acknowledgement 0.3 days later. I returned from running an errand to find Margaret on my porch. Her face was smug. "We have rejected your tenant application." She said, "This is a family neighborhood, not a college dorm." I remained calm on what grounds the bylaws specifically permit this arrangement. "The board has complaints about parking noise and maintaining the community." She gestured, waving hand. "Please send the board's written response as per Section 12 of the bylaws." Her smile did not last. "I'll have it in writing. Meanwhile, your tenant has to vacate by week's end." I hadn't intended to ask Daniel to vacate without cause. The very next day, one of my board members emailed me an apologies. The application had indeed passed through. Margaret had overstepped. Again, things came to a boil when I traveled out of town for a short business trip. I had Daniel and next-door neighbor Elise keep an eye on the place while I was away. Daniel seemed nervous. "There is something you should see," he said, yanking open the kitchen drawer where we kept a printed lease. Red ink strike-throughs marked the pages. Scribbled notes said certain provisions were unapproved or a violation. Who did this? I asked, although already had a sinking feeling. Margaret. She dropped by, reported she was reviewing the property. I had taken her around to look at the lease, and she said she was making changes, then instructed me to begin searching for a new site. I was outraged. Margaret had trespassed on my home in ill faith and destroyed a binding legal document that was not HOA conduct, that was illegal. That I called the police immediately first. The responding officer appeared uninterested, but I explained everything. Calmly produced my credentials, the torn lease and original electronic record. His demeanor switched. "This is property damage, breaking into your house illegally on fake pretenses." Illegal breaking in. He took it out and gave a report in depth, also called the HOA board, zero point 0.5 inches above where it's supposed to be. She charge mailed them with copies of the lease and police report. Some members returned in shock, and he drew a loaded gun on my son on our front lawn in the middle of the day over a bird feeder. And behind him was Brenda with her HOA clipboard, and that always their sour scowl that smelled more like vinegar than perfume you find in our too-manicured suburban utopia known as Willow Ridge Estates, where lawns are checked like military bases and your porch light bulbs need to be HOA-approved wattage. We somehow ended up with a self-appointed HOA president who ruled more like a small king than a kind neighbor. The man with the gun, her boyfriend Cal, a part-time sheriff's deputy with a full-time superiority complex, and no clue about personal boundaries. They thought they called the shots around here. That was until they met the wrong man, my son Marcus. What Brenda did not know was that Marcus is not some quiet man home from war. He's a former Special Forces operative. He's calm trained, and most of all, he's legally armed. What happened next? Well, Willow Ridge would never be the same that we had moved into Willow Ridge Estates for peace. My husband and I had just retired, and we were drawn by offers of peace, potlucks, and the sunny drudgery of suburban life. The place came with peaceful cul-de-sacs, hedged gardens, and gossip passing as neighborhood watch. We had bird feeders, lawn ornaments, and coffee on the porch. Then arrived Brenda. She penned small notes about our flagpole being a visually disruptive element per HOA code, 3.7 complaints about our garden gnome, Harold being an unauthorized holiday decoration. We laughed initially. We thought that she must be lonely, or maybe just too absorbed in lawn care, but laughs turned to incredulity when the fines began to arrive. $1.75 for a mailbox flag being $1.25 too tall. $200 for painting the garage trim with a slightly other color of tan than the one Brenda pre-approved. That's when we saw Brenda wasn't a neighbor. She was a one-man rule, she unopposed, held HOA president. No wonder, since nobody wanted the position, then redrew the bylaws so no one else would run. She dominated every meeting, changed every voting practice, and closed down anybody who acted as questioning her authority. Bring in Cal, her enforcer, not officially HOA, but ever conveniently around to assist with enforcement. Suddenly, he was everywhere, cruising around in his cruiser, knocking on doors, patrolling, like we were all suspects. And then Marcus returned home, my son, quiet as dawn, and twice. Steady, he said, ma'am and sir, too. Everyone cut our lawn every Sunday and kept to himself. Brenda never liked him. From the moment she saw him, said, he, look, threatening. Said his pickup truck was oversized, said our American flag was an aggressive political statement that we ignored her until the violations began to accumulate. The day it erupted, Marcus was hanging a bird feeder on our old oak. I was drinking tea on the porch. Brenda marched up with Cal 2 steps behind, mirrored sunglasses on badge clearly visible. She announced we were in violation of Code 6.3b, unauthorized wildlife attraction devices. Marcus turned birdseed still clutched and said, "Are you serious?" That's when Cal pulled out his gun. No warning, just pulled it out and pointed straight into my son. Marcus didn't flinch. He glared at Cal, smiled, not a warm smile, but an intense, unnerving grin that sent, "You just made the wrong guy." If that was the culmination, the overture began months ago. Brenda had begun her HOA coup 2 years ago. At first, it was innocent holiday banners, newsletters, reminders to recycle. But once she got a taste of power, she made Willow Ridge a dictatorship with bonus citations for lawn ornament violations, warnings for mismatched patio furniture, fines for worn-out shutters. She once punished the Harrisons for having their recycling bin out. 30 minutes past the deadline, her control freak love affair hit its zenith with the creation of what she dubbed the Neighborhood Aesthetic Guide. 36 pages of minutia control freakism. The guide banned wine chimes, were mandated house numbers in bronze only, and 2 chairs tops front yard seating. The first time I actually ever feared her was when she appeared on my doorstep with a level and a tape measure, just making sure mailbox height regulation. She said, "Ed us $50 a week later, a fine for an uncoiled hose." As Brenda so aptly put it, Our green hose ruptured the visual continuity of the neighborhood. When Marcus returned from deployment, he parked his F-250 in our driveway. "It's too big," Brenda said. "It's within legal parameters on private property." Marcus said, "If the tires cross the sidewalk line by 1 inch, it's communal." She snapped. Marcus nodded and said nothing, but I saw it, that quiet, calculating calm. Preparing and prepare he did. Brenda and Cal began what we called their compliance patrols. They walked the neighborhood with clipboards, snapping pictures, handing out fines like candy. One neighbor was cited for having more than one flag, another for excessive lawn gnome clustering. But Marcus, he stayed quiet every night. He researched bylaws, printed material, and built up a file so thick it needed its own shelf. He had gathered emails, video footage, timestamps, and depositions from neighbors. He was collecting legal firepower. Then came the bird feeder brawl. Marcus hung it as much because he liked to see cardinals and blue jays. Brenda complained to us. Marcus replied that 3 houses in this area had feeders. She smiled, "They're on the list." 3 days later, they fined him $300. Marcus just said, "Okay," which meant something was coming duck. He planted pine straw around the yard. Brenda asserted it, landscape aggression. She called an emergency HOA meeting. No public notice, and adopted a rule banning natural mulch without approval. Marcus appealed. She rejected it. He appealed once more. Sheaf and yell, he just documented everything. Soon the Johnsons put up audio of Cal making suggestive remarks in the course of a compliance check. The Thompsons discovered surveillance footage of Brenda trespassing in their yard. Even older Mrs. Landers had a binder full of citations, 28 violations for anything from wind chimes to holiday decorations. Marcus compiled it all into a 50-page dossier and presented it to the county HOA review board, along with a formal complaint: abuse of authority, misspending funds, harassment, and stalking without consent. Meanwhile, Brenda escalated. She installed security cameras on HOA property directly facing our house. She filed noise complaints on Max, our 13-year-old retriever, stating his bark caused community unrest. Then she cited us for our American flag hijacking the pole, which posed a danger threat. Then came the day Cal drew his weapon. Marcus had already obtained a temporary restraining order against Kel for prior harassment. When Kel showed up on our lawn, he did invade when he drew his weapon. He was a felon on tape, all taped on 3 cameras. That an hour later, actual deputies showed up. They arrested Cal in the open. Brenda tried block cameras, yelling that Marcus had set them up. No one trusted her anymore. When Marcus picked up her skidded clipboard, he found something golden. Brenda had signed off on tripling her HOA allowance, a state HOA ethics law infraction. That a hearing was scheduled, the neighborhood packed the community hall. Brenda, without legal representation, tried to justify the fines, the cameras, the money. But Marcus laid out the facts, matter-of-factly. The vote was unanimous. Brenda was led away. A criminal investigation was launched. Kay was charged. The HOA was dissolved and reformed with an open new board. Marcus declined an offer. He said he just wanted to sip coffee and watch the birds that we reinstated herald the gnome. Repainted the garage trim, and our bird feeder still swings from the old oak. Drawing goldfinches and Peace, the final chapter. Brenda sued for defamation on grounds. She demanded $250,000 in damages the court threw out. It with prejudice, she was directed to pay legal fees. Her bank account was frozen. Her future in HOA management, sealed. Willow Ridge became a community once more. Not perfect, but free. And Marcus, he smiles more these days, says, "Peace feels louder after a war." And I concur, all because of